And so we start with the Arizona Wildcats. We're going to get into how many returning starters. Just kidding. They open August 30th. They have Hawaii to start their season.
Yeah, that one, I'm not sure they're all that worried about, but I'm curious to see, early on in the season, how do you adjust to no Teteroa McMillan? How do you adjust to no Jonas Saviana? All of that. Like, that's Saviane, I'm sorry. But how do you adjust to all those things? What weapons do you have for Noah Fafita? And how do you do against a team like Hawaii?
Yeah, I mean, their non-conference is interesting. Hawaii, Weber State, they should be 2-0 coming out of the gates. Just my first glance, I think it's you take a look at the non-con, right? The games before you get into the Big 12, and it's weird because they've got Kansas State because of the whole arrangement with the Pac-12 and how all that worked. So you get K-State there again this year, and then can finally move off of that. But Hawaii, Weber State, and Kansas State. How about we start there as far as a non-conference goes? I think you're clearly looking at 2-1. Worst case, I mean, you should not lose to Hawaii. The only reason you should possibly lose to Hawaii is if you were traveling out to Hawaii and it was just the difficult road trip and it's the start of the year and whatnot. But you're not. You're in Tucson. You're in Tucson the following week, and you're in Tucson the week after that. You don't leave home for non-conference play. So that's my first thoughts is 3 straight home games to start the year, 3 games that are winnable. We don't know how good K-State's going to be. We don't know how good Arizona's going to be. But, yeah, I think you're looking at 2-1 coming out of that, and a lot of questions that should get answered over the course of those 3 games, like who are Teteroa McMillan's new favorite targets with Noah Fafita's new favorite targets with no Teteroa McMillan. Yeah, how do they do without a great offensive lineman who's likely going in the first round? How do some of these coaching changes work? Seth Dagey, their new offensive coordinator, a Texas guy, how does he fit into the big picture and work alongside Noah Fafita to try and get this offense to be its best version of itself? I think the reason why I said kind of going into the break is we don't want to get into like their personnel so deep and do all that because we can do that in spring ball. So yeah, my first thoughts on the schedule is that non-con is highlighted clearly by K-State, and I think you feel good about winning at least 2 of those games. But if you were to somehow win that third one, then I think you're feeling great because you'd be beating what should be a pretty good K-State team, and that's leading you right into Big 12 play there.
I don't like. And I'm not. It's not like I'm put my foot down. I don't like the non-conference conference games.
I think that ends in a year. So.
Yeah, I don't know how long that's going to last. I never really paid much attention to other than the fact that they're going to have it. But I just I don't know how they're going to get around that. But
they get around it because it's not going to be scheduled any longer because they were games that were scheduled before.
I know the Baylor-Utah game and
right. That's
and
what
things
this
like
is.
That. Yeah.
So it's not like they signed a 10-year agreement. They signed whatever it was, home and home.
I understand it. The fact I'm glad they're playing because that's a good game for both teams. That's a nice game for both teams. You mentioned the coordinators are gone. How hot is the seat for Brennan? That remains to be seen. That, of course, take care of itself as time ticks along the way. And Noah Fafita without McMillan, when he needs a bounce-back year, will be interesting to see who his weapons are going to be.
Well, and again, that first test is going to come against Kansas State.
Yep.
And, like Kansas State will have probably a lot to prove there as well, in that, you've got this opportunity with Avery Johnson to kind of hit the ground running. But here's the thing. They will have already played by the time they get to Arizona 2 really good teams in Iowa State, in Dublin, and then they would have played we'll see what Army is next year, but they will have to play Army. So they will have had it tougher than Arizona going in. So that's a key matchup to see how either of these teams are measuring up, especially Arizona, for the purpose of this discussion.
All right, so there's the non-conference schedule. Now, let's do these these in like clumps of 3, or we could do it all together.
Well, we
Everybody
can
have
do
their
it
own.
where the non-conference ends going into a bye week. So there's the first part of their season is that non-conference schedule. So then they get the bye week after Kansas State, and then they go into their second phase where they start off conference play late September at Iowa State. They'll get Oklahoma State at home, BYU at home, and then they travel to Houston. So there's their second block before the second bye week. So bookended by trips to Ames and Houston, and you've got the Cowboys, who we have no idea what Oklahoma State's going to be. I mean, we have no utter idea, because it would be foolish to sit here and pretend like we really know when last year we were all so sure of how good they were going to be, and they clearly weren't. I would expect they have to be better, right? Like, they have to be.
I actually think they'll be worse.
You think so?
I am unequivocally right now, I will not change my mind by July. I'm picking them last.
Well, that's fair. I mean, Alan Bowman's, for whatever you thought of him, he was still a very veteran quarterback, and so he's gone. Ollie Gordon's gone, obviously, and a lot of other really talented players. So, yeah, I mean, I could see a scenario where they're worse. It's just, I guess the optics of that are going to be very interesting if, in fact, they're worse, because last year, guys, was pretty damn
Well, I mean,
bad.
or the same.
Or the same,
yeah.
well, which was pretty damn bad. So, yeah, so you've got that 3-game non-con and then that 4-game stretch at Iowa State, Oak State, BYU at home, and then at Houston. And I think you can't guarantee a win in any of these games. Maybe if Houston was at home, you'd feel really good about that one. But, yeah, I mean, they're going to be 2-1, maybe 3-0. And if they're 3-0, then you probably feel great getting 2 weeks to prepare for a trip to Ames. If you're 2-1, I guess it would depend on what that one against K-State kind of looked like. But going to the Cyclones to start things off, that's going to be, I don't know what to make of that stretch, honestly. It's because we just don't have any clue on who's going to be what,
But look, Iowa State retains most of its roster.
Yeah.
They have to replace a couple wide receivers, which they've done in the transfer portal. Gotten some pretty good ones. Oklahoma State, like I said, I have no faith in them to be good. Like,
right.
Not only is the roster completely turning over, for maybe the first time in his entire tenure, Mike Gundy's on the hot seat. Like that.
Yeah,
I don't know how that. I don't know how that all works out. I don't know how he responds to being a guy who's in jeopardy. Because he's been comfortable. BYU returns pretty much most of it, and we'll see if they can repeat that. And Houston, I think, gets better, one, because Willie Fritz here, two, and two, because Connor Wegman's there.
Yeah, I just wonder about defensively. You lose Shield Woods, so there are changes in that regard. But, yeah, I mean, Houston on the road, too, that could be anything. But Iowa State, BYU, I mean, those are two tough games. So in your first 6 games, you would have played K-State, who I'd imagine is going to be probably voted top 5 in the conference. BYU, who I'd imagine will be voted top 5. Iowa State. I mean, three of those 3 teams will be somewhere in or near that top 5. So by the time you hit that second bye week, I mean, going off paper, you're probably about 500. It's going to make that last stretch of games, which is going to be 5 straight games to close the season. That's going to be a real test of whether or not you're getting to the postseason, and maybe you're playing for your job if you're Brent Brennan at that point.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to just look at logos, because we're really good at that in the Big 12, right, Garrett? Look at logos that always. Kansas State, that's not a conference game, but they lose that game. Iowa State, I would say they lose that game. BYU, I would think they lose that game. I think I think Colorado, even with some of the star power they're losing, is still going to be pretty good. Man, I don't know.
Well, there's like 3 losses in those first 2 legs that are guaranteed if you're going off logos. They're going to lose to K-State. They're going to lose to Iowa State. They're going to lose to BYU. So at that point, you're looking at, if we're going on paper, which we know this is not how it will go, but then you're looking at 4-3 and going into November with a 5-game stretch, the way that their schedule works out. So you got at Colorado to start off that stretch, Kansas at home, Cincinnati on the road, Baylor at home, and Arizona State on the road. To Colorado, I mean, it's a road trip. That's a familiar foe, but it's hard to determine how good Colorado's going to be because we don't even know who the starting quarterback is right now, and you lost the Heisman Trophy winner. So I can't imagine you're going to be as talented at the very top. Maybe you're balanced talent-wise, but on paper, I'd say that's I guess, a loss. Kansas, like, which version are they? I'd expect that Jalen Daniels has knocked the rust off, so they'll get a lot of preseason love and maybe be able to live up to that this time around. But Cincinnati, who the heck knows? Baylor, I think I'd lean Baylor, especially, that's in Tucson.
Even I'm with you though. I'm leaning Baylor because returning quarterback, running backs are the same. Returning offensive line that actually turned out to be good. Like all those things, plus a defense that I think will be improved with the additions that they've made.
Yeah. So and then Arizona State to close out the year. Obviously, we think Arizona State will be pretty good. So I mean, on paper, if you're doing logos and games are going to win, there's the win over Hawaii, the win over Weber State. Let's give them Oak State because Paul's definitely not believing in them. I'll split the Houston, Colorado, and give them one of those. And then Cincinnati, although that's on the road, I mean, they're really, on paper, they're going to be really stretching it and maybe playing to the final couple weeks trying to get that 6th win for Brent Brennan. I mean, just based on looking at the schedule. But it does line up. You've got 3 games, then you've got the, 5 straight games, 3 games, break, 4 games, break, 5 straight games to close the season. So that's how their little set of the 3 parts will work.
I love the way that they have been able to build in those breaks. Not some teams would get one year, some teams would get 2. That they're all getting 2. That they get the breaks. Yeah, that I like. So that like when conferences say, "Well, we really can't do that." Yes, you can. You can pivot very quickly. So.
Well, that's a result. I think that carries over from last year, just the way the calendar worked. I don't know that that's going to be the case moving forward, although I think there will be –
I bet you it will if they move it up.
I bet there will be a discussion about that, and if they do move the calendars up, then, you'd probably see 2 bye weeks. I'm all for 2 bye weeks. I liked having that second bye week last year, just kind of take a breath and enjoyed having just a moment to kind of, reset a little bit towards the end of the year, and I'm sure the players and coaches all love the ability to do that as well. So – it's a treat to have that again this year. I don't know beyond that how all that'll work, but I'd be all for double bye weeks, although the calendar's such a mess. I don't know, what that affects. And then, what about this and that? Because that's what everything is, right? It's like, if we take this and what about that? But I'd be all for double bye weeks.
One of the things about the double bye week, and it wasn't the second one, but last year Baylor was in the gutter. 2-4. Coming off the 3 consecutive losses to Colorado and the Hail Mary, then BYU and Iowa State. The Hail Mary that sent it into overtime. They had a bye week and came back, went on the road to Lubbock and scored 59 points against Texas Tech. There's no way that – I don't know how many people expected them to win that game. I know there's emotion there and all that with Joey, et cetera. But that reset, so you just – even when you don't look good or you're not playing well or you're close or not – that was a huge deal when you look at the bye week. And, of course, the second one comes a little bit later. I think it's important because, especially with teams, let's say you're not a team. Let's say you get to a bowl game, you play 13 games. You don't play in a conference championship game. But those who are going to go 1, 2, or 3 rounds deep, getting an extra bye week or getting a second week to take a deep breath, especially maybe towards the last third of the season, can be huge. Even though there's a break after the conference championship weekend.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'll enjoy that this year. And then, like I said, we'll see beyond that. But that is a bonus, I think, for the coaches and players and even fans to an extent, and media, obviously, like we're talking about, to have experienced that last year and then again this season. So all the changes, maybe that's another one in the future of – well, especially if we're going to go do OTAs now and then we're going to do why not have 2 bye weeks if you're going to play a longer season? But regardless, that leaves us kind of here and with Arizona. They've obviously made some changes. A new offensive coordinator, promoted a defensive coordinator. Brent Brennan's on the hot seat. Your quarterback's back. Your star wide receiver's gone. Your star offensive lineman's gone. Now, there's a lot of other points to that, and that's why I'd rather wait till spring ball to kind of dive into who is Arizona really. But on the surface, knowing those things, I don't know how much I anticipate how much better they will be. And so looking at the schedule, like I said, I think if you go off logos, which is not going to be 100% accurate, I think this is a team fighting to make a bowl game and probably means Brent Brennan's fighting to make his job. Now, in terms of, obviously, with conferences being bigger, who did you get on your schedule? Who did you miss out on? I mean, they got K-State, they got Iowa State, they got BYU, they got Baylor, they got Arizona State. I mean, I'd say those 5 schools all very much in the title talk last year at varying points or putting themselves in position to be a team of interest to talk about that later in the year. So what did you miss out on? You're not playing Texas Tech, you're not playing TCU. But beyond that, Yeah, I think that they've got a pretty tough schedule on paper, especially with K-State being a non-con.
Okay, if you take the teams that were good this year, which means you flip them next year, but yeah, you're right. K-State, Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, Baylor, and Arizona State.
Kansas was as hot as anybody.
And Kansas was red hot till the end. Yeah, and then lost that game where they seemed to run out of gas, and Baylor was red hot at the time. And then it's going to be kind of an interesting thing to see where Colorado is this year. You know, they lose an enormous amount of playmakers, but maybe they're going to be different in how they play. They're going to still be just fine.
It's hard to imagine you lose a first-round NFL quarterback and a Heisman Trophy winner, and then you're better. But are you more, like what I said a few minutes ago, are you more balanced? You know, you're not as top-heavy, star-heavy-wise, but you have a lot of players who are all a little bit better than they were across the board. But, yeah, I mean, you would expect them, at least early on, they're going to take a dent there.
They're losing all of those wide receivers.
All the wide receivers, yeah.
They're
Wester,
losing
all those
Shadur,
guys,
Wester, Horn, Hunter, and Shepard. Like, they're all
It's
gone.
hard to imagine you're going to replace all that.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine, but if anybody can do it, it's probably them. By the way, just transfer portal alone, you know, signing day was officially over last week, but they're also bringing in 25 commits in the transfer portal. So at pretty much, and when you have 25, pretty much every position that you can imagine, they're bringing in guys.
Who? Colorado?
No,
Arizona. Okay, yeah, good.
So like when you look at it, depending on where you look, like all guys, 3-star guys. So I would think that their talent might be a little bit deeper with experience, but are they better? And it's like, do you lose Tedero McMillan and get better? Just like we said, like
he's the number 7 ranked player in the draft.
Yeah. So you don't like. You can do that when you're Alabama, when you can lose Devontae Smith, and then there's another dude that's like right there.
I mean, if anything, maybe you're not as feast or famine, because that's what it felt like sometimes last year. But no, I don't anticipate now. Last year they started off 3-1, and then they got into deeper Big 12 play, and that's when they rattled off those 5 straight losses, and they lost 7 out of their last 8. So, yeah, I mean, they completely tanked down the stretch of last season. I know there were injuries. You had, obviously, a new staff and things of that nature. Fafita didn't play his best ball on a lot of Saturdays last year. He was not as good as you thought that he could be. So I'd expect a big rebound from him, a guy that you thought maybe would go in the transfer portal. But he's back at Arizona. He's the ringleader, just like he was when he was a young commit and rallying in guys like Tedero McMillan and various others. But that's going to be it's a feasible schedule. It's not like some gauntlet that's not going to be able to be overcome. But I do think Brent Brennan's going to probably be playing with a little bit of fire by the end of the year to try to get win number 6. And if not, then, hey, I'll gladly say I'm wrong. But this is kind of what this exercise is for, is just this very first glance with a lot of fill-in-the-blanks still left to do, looking at the schedule. It's got some tough teams, but it's manageable. If they're better than they were last year, they can make a bowl game. You're not going to lose 7 out of your last 8 or whatever down the stretch again this year.
All right, I know we're not doing like we're not doing a prognostication. We're just looking at the games. But this is what Jason Scheer sent me. All right.
Okay.
New coordinators on both sides of the ball. Kind of touched on that and how that's going to affect Fafita, especially with what he does. Brennan hot seat after 1 year. Is the team any better? Offensive line lost multiple players, but also added a bunch in the portal. Will it be good? And then finally, can Noah Fafita bounce back after such a disappointing year?
Do we know some Arizona dang football, or do we know some Arizona dang football?
Yeah, bitches!
Yeah, we did it. Yeah, look, we learned. And
I mean, that's right on point, though. I mean, so, yeah, we hit all the bullet points. You're taking too far. We hit all the bullet points.
That was my shoulder.
But, yeah, I think that's the key. And, like, with any team, the transfer piece, do those guys pan out? We really have no idea. Like, Texas Tech on paper looks like it should be really good. But do all those guys stay healthy through spring ball and summer practices? And, so, you don't know. The transfer is such a wild card on how that actually pans out. But they did address a lot of things. I mean, Brennan made urgent moves. Like, you could tell they know that he's on that hot seat, and they had to work quickly. So, yeah, Fafita, that's a big piece, man, because he was not nearly as good as I anticipated he would be last year, and definitely cost him, some results, I think, with some of his turnovers and decision-making.
Yeah, I mean, even that being said, Craig, I still was amazed that he didn't transfer, because you could point a lot of that to the running game, which they didn't have last year because they couldn't keep a running back on the, in the roster.
That was a problem we haven't mentioned, but you had the whole Krosky Merritt situation. They got thrown for a loop, and they really had little to no run game.
Once that was after that first, couple of games. So then after that, they didn't have an answer for it. Now they've addressed that with, I think that they've picked up 2 or 3 running backs in the portal that all kind of outrank what Krosky Merritt was. So hopefully for them that's better, but that is something you're going to have to deal with. And if they need that for Fafita, because you can't just put it all on him, especially now without, Sasquatch out there at wide receiver who can just go up and get the ball all the time. So they've got so many different things they've got to do. But I thought Fafita might say, you know what? I didn't realize how much he loved Arizona, how much he really did, which is a great thing that they have him and that there's an anchor for the program, because he's good enough to where if he had decided to go to, I can think of 5 schools off the top of my head where he might have been the first choice, but he would have been the second choice at least. Oklahoma might have been one. If Mateer, goes to Miami instead of Oklahoma, then Fafita, if he's in the portal, that's probably their second choice.
Yeah, if he's better this year, then I think they'll be better. That sounds so stupid, but I think you know what I'm saying. He's here's their guy. He's their dude. So if he can raise his play, then he raises the entire team around him, is what I'm trying to say. But you are going to definitely be missing Tedero McMillan, because that's his right-hand guy. Although I do like, you talked about the running backs, Ishmael Mahdi was somebody they brought in from Texas State. I thought he'd end up at Texas Tech, but they clearly had their eyes elsewhere. So I think Mahdi, in addition to a couple of the other guys they brought in, should re-solidify that backfield and give McMillan an option or give Fafita an option outside of just having to pass them to victory, every Saturday. But I was surprised as well, and then again, not as surprised about him staying at Arizona. If you read a little bit about his history and his love for that school, and again, how he was the ringleader with his high school teammates and bringing everybody into the fold there in Tucson, including McMillan. There's nobody that's more Arizona football these last few years than Noah Fafita. So I'm glad that he stayed. I'm glad that he's finishing his story there. Although it would have probably been pretty easy to go and run and take a pretty big check from somewhere else, like Norman, Oklahoma, or wherever might have been looking. He definitely would have been a guy that was receiving a lot of phone calls, but I appreciate his loyalty, because that's not something we see a lot of these days.